Richetti at last found him. The Italian was energetic in examining the ruins, but presently Poirot, espying a green-lined sunshade which he recognised on the rocks down by the river, escaped in that direction. Mrs. Allerton was sitting on a large rock, a sketch-book by her side, and a book on her lap. Poirot removed his hat politely, and Mrs. Allerton at once entered into conversation. "Good morning," she said. "I suppose it would be quite impossible to get rid of some of those awful children." A group of small figures surrounded her, all grinning and posturing and holding out imploring hands as they lisped backshish at intervals, hopefully. "I thought they'd get tired of me," said Mrs. Allerton sadly. "They've been watching me for over 2 hours now, and they close in on me little by little, and then I yell, 'Imishi,' and brandish my sunshade at them, and they scatter for a minute or two. And then they come back and stare, and their eyes are simply disgusting, and so are their noses, and I don't believe I really like children, not unless they're more or less washed and have the rudiments of manners." She laughed ruefully. Poirot gallantly attempted to disperse the mob before her, but without avail. They scattered and then reappeared, closing in once more. "If there were only any peace in Egypt, I should like it better," said Mrs. Allerton, "but you can never be alone anywhere. Someone is always pestering you for money, or offering you donkeys or beads or expeditions to native villages or duck shooting." "It is the great disadvantage, that is true," said Poirot. He spread his handkerchief cautiously on the rock and sat somewhat gingerly upon it. "Your son is not with you this morning," he went on. "No, Tim had some letters to get off before we leave. We're doing the trip to the second cataract, you know." "I too. I'm so glad. I want to tell you that I'm quite thrilled to meet you. When we were in Mallorca, there was a Mrs. Leach there, and she was telling us the most wonderful things about you. She'd lost a ruby ring bathing, and she was just lamenting that you weren't there to find it for her. Ah, parbleu, but I am not the diving seal." They both laughed. Mrs. Allerton went on. "I saw you from my window walking down the drive with Simon Doyle this morning. Do tell me what you make of him. We're so excited about him." "Ah, truly. Yes, you know his marriage to Linnet Ridgway was the greatest surprise. She was supposed to be going to marry Lord Windlesham, and then suddenly she gets engaged to this man no one had ever heard of. You know her well, madame?" "No, but a cousin of mine, Joanna Southwood, is one of her best friends." "Ah, yes, I have read that name in the papers." He was silent a moment, and then went on. "She is a young lady very much in the news, Mademoiselle Joanna Southwood." "Oh, she knows how to advertise herself all right," snapped Mrs. Allerton. "You do not like her, madame?" "That was a nasty remark of mine." Mrs. Allerton looked penitent. "You see, I'm old-fashioned. I don't like her much. Tim and she are the greatest of friends, though." "I see," said Poirot. His companion shot a quick look at him. She changed the subject. "How very few young people there are out here. That pretty girl with the chestnut hair and the appalling mother in the turban is almost the only young creature in the place." "You have talked to her a good deal, I notice. She interests me, that child. Why is that, madame? I feel sorry for her. You can suffer so much when you are young and sensitive. I think she is suffering. Yes, she is not happy, poor little one. Tim and I call her the sulky girl. I've tried to talk to her once or twice, but she snubbed me on every occasion. However, I believe she's going on this Nile trip too, and I expect we'll have to be more or less all matey together, shan't we? It is a possible contingency, madame. I'm very matey, really. People interest me enormously. All the different types. She paused, then said, Tim tells me that the dark girl, her name is de Belfort, is the girl who was engaged to Simon Doyle. It's rather awkward for them, meeting like this. It is awkward, yes, agreed Poirot. You know, it may sound foolish, but she almost frightened me. She looks so intense. Poirot nodded his head slowly. You are not far wrong, madame. A great force of emotion is always frightening. Do people interest you too, Monsieur Poirot, or do you reserve your interest for potential criminals? Madame, that category would not leave many people outside it. Mrs. Allerton looked a trifle startled. Do you really mean that? Given the particular incentive, that is to say, Poirot added, which would differ. Naturally, Mrs. Allerton hesitated, a little smile on her lips. Even I, perhaps. Mothers, madame, are particularly ruthless when their children are in danger. She said gravely, I think that's true. Yes, you're quite right. She was silent a minute or two. Then she said, smiling, I'm trying to imagine motives for crime suitable for everyone in the hotel. It's quite interesting. Simon Doyle, for instance. Poirot said, smiling. A very simple crime, a direct shortcut to his objective, no subtlety about it, and therefore very easily detected. Yes, he would not be ingenious. And Linnet, that would be like the Queen in your Alice in Wonderland, off with her head. Of course, the divine right of monarchy, just a little bit of the Naboth's vineyard touch, and the dangerous girl. Jacqueline de Belfort, could she do a murder? Poirot hesitated for a minute or two, then he said doubtfully, yes, I think she could, but you're not sure? No, she puzzles me, that little one. I don't think Mr. Pennington could do one, do you? He looks so desiccated and dyspeptic, with no red blood in him, but possibly a strong sense of self-preservation. Yes, I suppose so. And poor Mrs. Otterbourne in her turban. There is always vanity. As a motive for murder, Mrs. Allerton asked doubtfully. Motives for murder are sometimes very trivial, madame. What are the most usual motives, Monsieur Poirot? Most frequent, money, that is to say, gain in its various ramifications. Then there is revenge, and love, and fear, and pure hate, and beneficence. Monsieur Poirot. Oh yes, madame, I have known of, shall we say, A being removed by B solely in order to benefit C. Political murders often come under the same heading. Someone is considered to be harmful to civilization and is removed on that account. Such people forget that life and death are the affair of the good God. He spoke gravely. excursion today, mademoiselle? Eh bien, they are picturesque, but do not spend large sums on native curios, which are shipped here from Europe. No, I am not so easy to deceive as that. With a little nod, she passed out into the brilliant sunshine. Poirot completed his packing, a very simple affair, since his possessions were always in the most meticulous order. Then he repaired to the dining room and ate an early lunch. After lunch, the hotel bus took the passengers for the second cataract to the station where they were to catch the daily express from Cairo to Chalal, a 10-minute run. The Allertons, Poirot, the young man in the dirty flannel trousers, and the Italian were the passengers. Mrs. Otterbourne and her daughter had made the expedition to the dam and to Philae, and she would join. The steamer at Chalal, the train from Cairo and Luxor, was about 20 minutes late. However, it arrived at last, and the usual scenes of wild activity occurred. Native porters, taking suitcases out of the train, collided with other porters, putting them in. Finally, somewhat breathless, Poirot found himself with an assortment of his own, the Allertons, and some totally unknown luggage in one compartment, while Tim and his mother were elsewhere with the remains of the assorted baggage. The compartment in which Poirot found himself was occupied by an elderly lady with a very wrinkled face, a stiff white stock, a good many diamonds, and an expression of reptilian contempt for the majority of mankind. She treated Poirot to an aristocratic glare and retired behind the pages of an American magazine. A big, rather clumsy young woman of under 30 was sitting opposite her. She had eager brown eyes, rather like a dog's, untidy hair, and a terrific air of willingness to please. At intervals the old lady looked over the top of her magazine and snapped an order at her. "Cornelia, collect the rugs. When we arrive, look after my dressing case. On no account let anyone else handle it. Don't forget my paper cutter." The train run was brief. In 10 minutes' time they came to rest on the jetty where the SS Karnak was awaiting them. The Otterbournes were already on board. The Karnak was a smaller steamer than the Papyrus and the Lotus, the first cataract steamers, which are too large to pass through the locks of the Aswan Dam. The passengers went on board and were shown their accommodation. Since the boat was not full, most of the passengers had accommodation on the promenade deck. The entire forward part of this deck was occupied by an observation saloon, all glass enclosed, where the passengers could sit and watch the river unfold before them. On the deck below were a smoking room and a small dressing room, and on the deck below that, the dining saloon. Having seen his possessions disposed in his cabin, Poirot came out on the deck again to watch the process of departure. He joined Rosalie Otterbourne, who was leaning over the side. "So now we journey into Nubia. You are pleased, mademoiselle?" The girl drew a deep breath. "Yes, I feel that one's really getting away from things at last." She made a gesture with her hand. There was a savage aspect about the sheet of water in front of them, the masses of rock without vegetation that came down to the water's edge, here and there a trace of houses abandoned and ruined as a result of the damming up of the waters. The whole scene had a melancholy, almost sinister charm. "Away from people," said Rosalie Otterbourne. "This is grand," he said, as he too leaned on the rail. "I'm really looking forward to this trip, aren't you, Linnet? It feels somehow so much less touristy, as though we were really going into the heart of Egypt." His wife responded quickly, "I know, it's so much wilder somehow." Her hand slipped through his arm. He pressed it close to his side. "We're off, Lynn," he murmured. The steamer was drawing away from the jetty. They had started on their 7-day journey to the second cataract and back. Behind them a light, silvery laugh rang out. Linnet whipped round. Jacqueline de Belford was standing there. She seemed amused. "Hello, Linnet. I didn't expect to find you here. I thought you said you were staying in Aswan another 10 days. This is a surprise." You didn't." Linnet's tongue stammered. She forced a ghastly conventional smile. I didn't expect to see you either." "No." Jacqueline moved away to the other side of the boat. Linnet's grasp on her husband's arm tightened. Simon. All Doyle's good-natured pleasure had gone. He looked furious. His hands clenched themselves in spite of his effort at self-control. The two of them moved a little away. Without turning his head, Poirot caught scraps of disjointed words. "Turn back. Impossible. We could." And then, slightly louder, Doyle's voice, despairing but grim. "We can't run away forever, Lynn. We've got to go through with it now." It was some hours later. Daylight was just fading. Poirot stood in the glass-enclosed saloon, looking straight ahead. The Karnak was going through a narrow gorge. The rocks came down with a kind of sheer ferocity to the river, flowing deep and swift between them. They were in Nubia now. He heard a movement, and Linnet Doyle stood by his side. Her fingers twisted and untwisted themselves. She looked as he had never yet seen her look. There was about her the air of a bewildered child. She said, "Monsieur Poirot, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of everything. I've never felt like this before. All these wild rocks and the awful grimness and starkness. Where are we going? What's going to happen? I'm afraid, I tell you. Everyone hates me. I've never felt like that before. I've always been nice to people. I've done things for people, and they hate me. Lots of people hate me, except for Simon. I'm surrounded by enemies. It's terrible to feel that there are people who hate you." "But what is all this, madame?" She shook her head. "I suppose it's nerves. I just feel that everything's unsafe all around me." She cast a quick, nervous glance over his shoulder. Then she said abruptly, "How will all this end? We're caught here, trapped. There's no way out. We've got to go on. I don't know where I am." She slipped down onto a seat. Poirot looked down on her gravely. His glance was not untinged with compassion. "How did she know we were coming on this boat?" she said. "How fancies himself, as if it mattered. Men are stupid. He's got to get used to living comfortably. The mere idea of a derby upset him. The needless expense